East Asia Forum, 19th of September 2023, The Two-Edged Debt Trap in China. China, the most significant bilateral lender in the world, has difficulties handling some of its borrowers' financial challenges under the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Its policy decisions will determine whether China can assist those borrowers and stay out of the debt trap. China, the most significant bilateral lender in the world, has difficulties handling some of its borrowers' financial challenges under the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Its policy decisions will determine whether China can assist those borrowers and stay out of the debt trap. On June 28, 2023, cargo ships are seen circling over Sichuan port in Jiangsu Province, China. In recent years, Sichuan has actively participated in the National Belt and Road Initiative and the Yangtze River Delta Regional Integration Development Strategy. However, the Western world has criticized China's BRI. The United States continues to worry that China's assent may compromise its interests and ideals. The BRI's purported lack of transparency and costly credit terms have been significant problems. The media and some policy circles continue to promote the notion of debt trap diplomacy despite new research dispelling this falsehood. In a debt trap technique, there are no winners because the debtor leaves its creditor out of pocket because they are stuck with unmanageable debt. The core issue with sovereign debt in the developing world is not so much China as it is how to reasonably manage unmanageable debt due to different creditors when the makeup of those creditors differs from nation to nation. Just 7% of Bangladesh's external governmental debt is owed to China, with the remaining 53% going to international creditors. Sri Lanka owes foreign bondholders 35% of its total debt, whereas Laos owes China alone 49%. Restructuring debt when it becomes unsustainable requires an understanding of the claims made by a debtor. This is the situation for a few Asian countries. Laos is still in financial difficulties, while Sri Lanka announced in April 2022 that it would no longer be making debt payments. Because of their optimism bias, policymakers must not make the same error twice by putting off important tasks. Many deeply indebted, impoverished countries have erased their debt due to a series of debt restructurings for emerging nations that began in the 1970s. It might be possible to better address the current debt crisis by looking at the history of debt relief under the sovereign debt governance mechanism during the previous 50 years. Since 1956, the Paris Club, an unofficial but well-established forum consisting primarily of developed Western nations, has coordinated the resolution of financial problems in emerging countries. Following a debt buildup during the petrodollar recycling boom in the late 1970s, the number of debt treatments under the Paris Club began to climb in the 1980s. Since the 1960s, some newly independent nation-states, mainly in Africa, have also accrued debt. Then, a string of debt problems started in South America and expanded to other parts of the world before decreasing in the late 1990s. The Paris Club creditors addressed the heavily indebted poor countries' unimproved prospects for debt servicing during this period of financial problems. They finally realized that solvency issues, not liquidity, were the cause of the extended postponement. The Paris Club has been implementing several debt treatment options, including debt elimination, since 1988. While multilateral creditors are typically granted the de facto preferred creditor status, the Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative, MDRI, allows a complete cancellation of multilateral debt at the expense of shareholders. The Heavily Indebted Poor Countries, HIPC, initiative permits up to 100% debt forgiveness. The G20 and creditors of the Paris Club decided to carry out the debt service suspension initiative at the start of the COVID-19 epidemic. In November 2020, the G20 Common Framework for Debt Treatments was released. China has ratified the Common Framework as a member of the G20. This includes adhering to fundamental concepts like comparability of treatment, which promotes fair burden sharing among all official bilateral creditors and private creditors, and conducting joint creditors negotiations in an open and transparent manner. However, some opponents of the common framework contend that China and other state creditors do not share enough financial characteristics for the framework to be practical. China has reduced its lending since 2017 to alleviate the debt burden, but China will still need to pursue debt relief measures because some nations still owe it a significant amount of money. China has been reducing lending while providing bailouts to BRI borrowers with financial difficulties. However, its rescue strategy usually aims to only postpone immediate default by giving middle-class countries fresh funding and low-income countries longer payment terms. This remedial approach, which parallels the procrastination of Paris Club creditors before embracing debt forgiveness in the 1990s, does this not alleviate the solvency issue without debt relief? According to China, multilateral creditors must mobilize new and additional concessional resources and participate in debt treatment per the principles of equitable burden sharing and collaborative action. China's current financial and economic problems, which include a severe domestic debt crisis, may account for its insistence on debt relief from international creditors and its unwillingness to offer debt relief for fear of causing moral hazard at home. However, even with concessional terms, new multilateral funding can have drawbacks because non-reschedulable multilateral debt can only be repaid at the expense of the shareholder nations. As a lesson from previous debt crises, China should consider upfront debt treatment for nations with unmanageable debt loads, particularly those overwhelmingly indebted to China. The debt decrease should be considered in terms of net present value. A climate-centric strategy, like debt for climate swaps, might be an additional choice, particularly if China pledges to support a Green Belt and Road Initiative. China should take early action to remove itself from the danger of becoming indebted. Otherwise, it can lose its financial claims and repeat the mistake of Western creditors.